Welcome to Season 3, Episode 2 of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Temple. In this episode, we're breaking down the concept of leadership as a developable skill. Joining me is Joe Fetzer, Principal Consultant and owner of Innovative Organizational Development. He's a former Marine bomb tech who knows all too well the importance of strong leadership skills in high-pressure environments. Let's get started. Joe, welcome to the podcast today. So glad to have you here with me. I know you've got a very unique background that's kind of brought you on this journey towards, starting to coach and provide leadership training and development, and just wanted you to share a little bit more of that story and how it kind of, from your background, how that drives your passion for helping other people to develop leadership skills.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Adrian. First and foremost, again, thank you for having me. Huge shout out to the South Carolina MEP Manufacturing Extension Partnership. I know you guys are leading a bunch of great, meaningful work, probably across the state, if not across the country, with manufacturing here in the good old United States. Again, truly a pleasure, truly an honor, I should say, being able to sit down and have this conversation with you. And the way I like to characterize my background and what I do now is I went from being a bomb tech in the Marine Corps to being a people tech in industry. And guess which one is more difficult? Yeah. Being the people tech, right? And, we were catching up beforehand, and honestly, that's my career path. That's my career journey. I spent a decade in the Marines. Had the opportunity to serve as an explosive ordnance disposal technician, which is one of the most critical and dangerous jobs on the earth. After that, moved back to Western Pennsylvania and just kind of naturally niched out in the whole people operations space, full scope organizational development and people operations. So the way, what I focus on now is increasing organizational effectiveness and efficiency through people operations, and innovative organizational development definitely gives me the platform to do that, and ultimately help companies with their number one competitive advantage, which is their people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, leadership is probably one of the key things that we continue to work with, manufacturers on. Obviously that's our segment of focus. I think business and the industry at large all need help with leadership development. But, can we define a little bit of like why are leadership skills so critical? Why is that an essential component for organizational success? Can you connect those dots, for listeners?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think you position that nicely. And actually, I would ask companies that when I'm out there interfacing with them, why is it important to recognize leadership as something we need to develop in the workplace? How is that linked to our business drivers? And how is that allowing us to do what we do so well, right? Which is usually getting product out the door. And we don't want to negate that, that the company has its mission itself. But more importantly, how are we connecting these leadership training and development programs to our core competencies or our business drivers? So I think it's really important to kind of throw that out there. And even people listening to the podcast today, can kind of think about that. How is leadership training and development connected to what we do and perform as an organization? And from my perspective, I would say that, that's directly connected to supporting people operations, right? And being able to effectively and efficiently lead people in the workplace. The anchor of that is viewing and recognizing leadership as a developable skill, right? So we learn how to lead. That doesn't matter if you're an entry level employee, a mid or senior level leader, or an executive, right? We all need to develop what are these leadership skills in the workplace, to lead. We need to view leadership development as a developable skill. The opposite of that is just thinking that as you move through your career, right, at different times in different positions, you're just going to have to lead people, right? You get promoted to a team leader, and now it's like you automatically download your next operating system,
I
right?
wish.
Yeah, you wish, right? Joe was a very good machinist, right? He's been at the company for a little bit of time, great at his job. Now we want to promote him to shop supervisor or team leader, right? So he was already really good at his job. So we're going to assume that he's going to now be really good, taking a step back from that technical role on a daily basis and now managing a people function in the workplace. And that's just not sustainable. That's not right. Instead, when we think about leadership development and skill development in the workplace, we really should take that full scope developmental approach towards it, in the sense that we want to invest in our people from the start to continue to develop that capacity to lead. So by the time they get put in charge of people, they've already built this muscle memory, identified what leadership skills are, and are putting them into practice in the workplace. If that makes any sense, I kind of just riffed there a little bit. So
No, it makes total sense, and that's kind of hits on a spot that I'm very passionate about because it was whenever I was in manufacturing, that was a general practice, not with the intent of doing anyone a disservice, but oftentimes the person that got promoted was someone who'd been there with the organization, who is an exceptional operator or whatever role they were, and they showed high proficiency, again, company loyalty. I mean, all the things that you would ask for, and then they would be moved into a supervisory role, which they were very excited about, but all of those skills did not come with them. So all of a sudden you're when you're in the people business, it's complicated. I don't think there's anybody that has it all figured out. I mean, everyone is so unique. You're going to run into situations you've never seen. You are dealing with people's emotions and the things that they bring with them to work, and it's just like you don't even have a toolkit to address any of that. If you come in completely blind, it really does put them in a terrible position. And I saw people, be let go because they were not performing it. Because you can never go back, right? That was always you can never go back. No, never go back to being an operator or whatever it was you were before. So it's like it just feels like you're putting them in a situation where they're going to ultimately fail, right? And nobody wants to do that, but for some reason that's a practice that consistently endures, it seems like. And I'm not really sure, and maybe you have some thoughts on that. I mean, what is it that prevents organizations from taking that perspective that you mentioned before about developing your people and understanding it starts before they even get into that position? I mean, what holds us back from doing that? Because the cost is so high on what happens as a result of not investing in their skills.
I really love how you position that. Even on that note, a lot of the times we feel like we have to come up with these very robust, intricate, just overly detailed solutions when it comes to leadership training and development in the workplace. Ultimately, what it is we want to set our people up for success, right? Because as you
Yeah.
said, a lot of the times people are set up for failure. They got promoted, right? They don't necessarily have that skill or expertise to lead people in the workplace. And ultimately, we just want to set them up for success, right? And at one time, even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a couple decades ago, all of the organizational focus has been on performing that core business driver, getting that product out the door, right? And just making sure that we're accomplishing that on a daily basis. What has changed is that industry and organizations have recognized the need, the necessity to develop their people right from the start, right? So I think that's been kind of the catalyst, in this day and age behind leadership training and development, because there's a lot of other auxiliary things that we accomplish, when we do develop leaders in the workplace. It's not just all about getting people together in a classroom and throwing content at them.
Mhm.
We of course need to provide that space to learn and develop these skills. But we're also talking about employee engagement. We're also talking about organizational culture. We're also talking about people being invested into. They like to see that. All right. And those things are linked to longer tenure. increase effectiveness, productivity, employee satisfaction, morale, welfare, and well-being in the workplace. So there's a lot of other kind of spider webs, if you will, that we accomplish when we focus on, again, developing our people in the workplace. And real quick, and I mentioned to you during our chat opening up, I was at a discussion last week where another participant threw out the term organizational unlearning. All right. Some of those practices that industry might have adopted, again, ago, just don't work anymore and are not sustainable. And I think that industry leaders really need to recognize that, right? Especially in reference to the pandemic. And I'm not defaulting to the pandemic. It's just that it's something that the world has never experienced before. And it's something that really disrupted the workplace. And it's something that really disrupted the manufacturing industry, And I think
Mhm.
we're still learning, all right, what worked then doesn't work now. And the precedent or the necessity to increase our focus on those core people operations on a daily basis has kind of risen to the top of that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that that is something that completely just it shifted everything. I mean, people's perspective about their workplace shifted as a product to the pandemic, right? Your prioritization, your how you felt about I mean, things changed. People's motivations may have shifted just because all of a sudden your eyes are open to a lot of things and a lot of the what the pandemic, the impacts it had on people's lives. It's interesting that I'd like to discuss a little bit, kind of in that same vein, what types of specific leadership skills has there been a shift in the types of skills that have risen to higher importance? There's lots of competencies that come with leadership, right? But have you seen a shift in kind of what those skills need to be? Because we've had generational shifts that happen, obviously, just general, what's happened in the broader, scale of the workplace in general based on the pandemic and those types of influences from from the external. Has there been a shift in the skills that are now really a priority over maybe what was important, 5 years ago or even just a few years ago?
Yes, 100%. And I think that, for the purpose of today's conversation, I can sum them up with four of them. All right.
Okay.
Communication, coaching, problem solving, and conflict resolution. All right. And again, recognizing those as a separate leadership skill and a separate process to develop each one of those skills. Again, linking this to the manufacturing industry, a lot of the work we do is procedural, right? And
Mhm.
we build muscle memory around that process. I mean, I think that if we like pulled people and asked them, what's the number one leadership skill that you see kind of necessary or applicable to today's workplace, I think the majority of people would default to communication, right?
Yeah.
Because simply the way we communicate now looks very differently, with people. And we can even reference some of that generational clash you were talking about in the workplace, right? And when we
Mhm.
break things down with those different generational cohorts that are participating in the workplace, you know, uh, baby boomers have very different needs, values, attitudes, opinions towards work and what they need out of an employer than millennials do, right? And a lot of that breaks down to how we communicate and interact with each other in the workplace. But we need to view communication as a leadership skill, as a developable skill. So, what's the process to develop effective and efficient communication practices in the workplace? But let's take that a step further, all right? Because that's where 99% of people will get you. All right. But we need to now start thinking about, all right, we identify that skill. We recognize that our need to communicate with our people across these different generational cohorts, across their different personal and practical needs in the workplace, across their different communication styles, right? Because now we have so many different modes and methods of communication. All right. Probably not unlikely that before the end of the day today, you will probably get a text message, email, phone call, Teams chat. All right. All these different
Yeah.
ways that we communicate. It's really thinking about how do we develop that skill, right? And then again, taking it that step further and applying it to that workplace setting. There has to be some type of application component to that, and there has to be some type of transfer of learning. All right. So we teach communication as a developable skill, and then our participants, our employees, need to start utilizing that process, that skill development in the workplace to become better communicators, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I was thinking about when you were just talking about the sitting in a class with training and versus application. There's the foundational concepts and getting you exposed to it. Then there's the application of it. And I'm curious, when you look at these groups that go through training, one thing that we often see, it's not necessarily wrong, but I think that's where you don't get, as much value or traction out of it, is there's kind of a one size fits all approach to the leadership training, right? So it has those core components. You teach it to everybody who's, at some level that needs it. But we're all unique individuals, right? So, going back to, you said, leaders are developed. You might come with a set of skills that already put you at an advantage to some degree. Maybe you're an exceptional communicator, um, able to really adapt to other people's style. Maybe that already is a gift that you have, but there are other things, right, that are going to be challenges for you as opposed to others. I mean, how do you really tackle something like that when you know that individuals have different strengths and weaknesses and places for development, and you want them to all be equally successful in this whole, leadership journey? What's a way that organizations can look at that and approach that so that they really pinpoint and help to move that person forward, invest that time and effort? What's your thoughts on that?
Two thoughts on that, and I'll riff on these a little bit. One, we contextualize the training, right? We make it relevant to the participants, individuals, and their workplace setting. All right. So maybe 20% of what we're focused on is moving through the content today, right?
Right.
And then 80% of that is being able to build a bridge from those concepts that we're learning to the workplace setting itself. So we want to be able to contextualize that training to make it relevant to those participants, right? If you're
Mhm.
if you're not doing that, then just pull up a YouTube video and have them watch it,
Yeah.
because there's no connecting of those dots there. But that's important because participants, speaking to that application piece, when we contextualize the training, they are able to immediately not only see the learning value in that, but apply it to the workplace setting, right?
Mhm.
And then two is developing training plans and programming that are sustainable in the sense that they're spatial learning. All right, that's a term I'll throw out there. I'm sure you're familiar with it, right? Where we provide space in the learning process, and that's how adults learn best. Is when there's time built in there to apply those skills and continue to learn throughout the process. Where we build programming that provides exactly that, that opportunity to learn something, have the space and time to experiment, apply it, recognize what's working, what's not, and continue to build those skills over time. So if we focus on building programming that's contextualized to the organization, and then there's some type of uh, spatial learning component of that where people have the time to again experiment, develop that muscle memory, um, you really do see results because that's ultimately what we're looking for, right? Like
Mhm.
what has changed, and a lot of what leadership is itself is behavioral. A lot of people would define leadership as a behavior. And if you're sending participants through leadership training and development, we don't always have to be quick to quantify these things, but you can just look and observe and be able to witness their skill development, their change. Again, some of those spider webs I was talking about before, organizational culture, the way people are interacting with each other, employee engagement, right? And then we can,
Mhm.
sit back and say that this is working. All right, we're having an impact. People are more engaged with themselves. They're developing these skills. They're happy and satisfied to come to the workplace. And we're increasing our effectiveness and efficiency through our people operations. So, yeah,
When you talk about developing, the training and how to set that up so that it's meaningful and valuable and delivers long-term results. On the flip side, what can organizations do? What can a manufacturer do to make sure that they're nurturing that journey, right? Because let's say delivering training, you're bringing the content, you're bringing the context, you're helping them to kind of frame this up, and then have time in between to absorb and apply. But how can, because this is what I see as a potential barrier for a lot of business. Everybody's busy, they're always busy, they're always going to be busy. Making space for that and nurturing it and not letting it be something that's kind of happening off in the background. How can a manufacturer or any industry leader really support and nurture that journey as they're starting to get their folks trained on this and go through processes like that? What is their obligation, or how can they best support that?
yeah. Well, of course, I think it starts with company leadership, right? And um, even just positioning it as, organizational leadership recognizes that they want to, invest in training and development, come up with some type of training and development plan. That definitely starts at the top, right? And a lot of the times, again, we think as leaders, we know what's best for the company, what our people need, what our people want. But when it comes to training and development, and this is another, I think, sustainability aspect of it, is that we want to be inclusive as much as possible, right? We want to tell our employees that, hey, we are going to engage in some type of training and development. We could even start with a needs assessment or needs analysis, right? Where we send out a survey to our participants, engage them with what they think. Now we're collecting data, right? As
Mhm.
organizational leaders, we're collecting data to see what they think that they need. And then we can start to develop a program from there. Again, just engaging with those participants to make them part of the process, right? This isn't a mandate. Instead, we're investing in the company, we're investing in you. We realize that our need to increase our effectiveness and efficiency through those people operations starts with training and development. And we want you to be part of this process. So I would start exactly there from the top, engaging with our participants, communicating what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and then building out a program from there. And you did say a lot of the times we feel like we don't have the time to do this, right?
Yeah.
Or we're just so busy. So when are we carving out the time? Which is always a concern. And if we take a look at what a spatial learning model should look like, we're really not just trying to cram training and development down people's throats, right? Instead, we're carving out. I mean, I'll even speak on one of the projects that I'm leading right now, where we have a 4-hour training block carved out with a group of mid and senior level leaders once a month. All right, and we've worked that to be a monthly cadence where we're doing training and development. People are getting the time to experiment with these. So by the time we get to our next session, we're able to start that session with those hows, what's, where's, when's, and whys. How are you seeing the skill being put into place? What are you noticing that's different? And then by the time we get to that second skill or second competency, we can start to compound those things because we're providing that space. We're giving people time to implement that. And we're not doing 2 classes a week for 10 weeks for 8 hours a day, because then people just become distracted. To sum that up, it really does start with the top. It starts with coming up with a plan that engages people throughout all echelons of the organization, and then it comes to implementing it, being able to contextualize it and provide that space for people to apply those skills. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, and we'll kind of go back to it, but that training in general and the way that you approach leadership development really has changed over time. And to your point, that short burst learning, where you're kind of taking it in bite-sized pieces, and absorbing just sections of it at a time makes it much more dynamic and much easier for, organizations to embrace, right? Because again, time it's really it's everything, right? We have it's at a premium and we want to get stuff out the door. And a lot of times it ends up getting in the way of us doing the things that we know are the right things to do and would help us if we would just, take that pause and do it. But the fact that it can be broken up and it can be very dynamic and spread out. I mean, that's things that have changed for us over time as well. But leadership is just so critical. It's something that you got to make room for. I mean, especially you have so many people that are exiting the workforce that have been highly tenured, and we've become quite comfortable with the fact that they're performing well, the skills match up, we're satisfied with that. But you have an entire pipeline, hopefully you have a pipeline. Your whole succession plan relies on the fact that you're taking that time for upfront investment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think the opposite of that, and what I'd throw out there is that if we're not engaging in people operations and training and development, what are we sacrificing now? Us even being able to have this conversation and recognize the need that people operations has risen to the top, the generational turnover, right? You have talent that has been, especially in the manufacturing industry, right? You have a lot of very senior people who have been tenured at these organizations for a very long time. And when they leave, all that tribal knowledge, right, that they've developed over the years goes with them. How are we transferring that, right? How are we building that next generation of leaders? Even thinking about reskilling and different developmental opportunities for people, throughout their career is all facilitated through training and development. And again, just anchoring it in that sustainable aspect of this, what results are we getting? How are we building programming that connects what we're talking about to the business, the organization, and the people itself? And how are we facilitating that at companies? Surplus of jobs, deficit of people. Some of the most meaningful work that I've done and continue to do has been in the manufacturing industry. I was doing a training and development initiative. This was a couple years ago, where we would do an live instructor led period of instruction, and then I had the opportunity to do one-on-one coaching with the participants. And I had a mid-level manufacturing leader, been in his role for just over 20 years. And you never know how people are going to respond to things like that. Just coaching, training, and development, especially manufacturers, right? You get a lot of just kind of hard knuckled people who have, really taken the time to develop their expertise over the years. I don't need that, right? Like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And this guy sat down with me and said, I wish I would have had this 20 years ago. And I was like, I was almost in tears, honestly, because I was overwhelmed with the emotion of hearing that, somebody that has been so successful. And now we're talking about building these leadership competencies, having that outlet to develop these skills. And it resonated with him that much to reflect and think, how different would it have been if I would have gotten this 20 years ago? And that told me everything I needed to know, honestly, about how people receive different trainings and leadership training. It's not the fact that we were going through the training. It's the fact that I think that participant and individual felt like he was being invested into. He was learning these skills to be a better, more productive employee. And that's what was going to take him to that next level. And I mean, how could you have a better result or impact than that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's huge really for someone to say that, especially like you said, someone who's tenured and been doing it for so many years and are very, yeah, very protective of kind of what they've built on their own. So
Right.
that's a huge statement. And it really is true. I mean, even, I can think back to, being a first time manager as well, devoid of any type of mentorship or coaching. You're you're destined for a path where you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna emulate behaviors you think are right. It's that whole cycle of like learn, unlearn, relearn. You're gonna have to do that. And I think that even in his case, looking back, you realize all of the things that you did that you're like, if I had known there was a better way to do it, you're kind of going to reflect back on that stuff and go, gosh, I did some stuff wrong. I mean, I don't think there's a single leader that could, if they're really honest, could sit there and say, oh, I've never done anything. I mean, we've all done something wrong or not as effectively as we could, but it just seems like it's so incredibly important to give people those skills to use in some level of mentorship or coaching, even if it's internal with someone who's more experienced and has already been through those types of things. It's just, I don't use this lightly. I mean, it really is a minefield, right? I mean, there's so much stuff that you could encounter and just be ill equipped to handle. And, that could be a make or break. So we talk about leadership, we talk about skill development. A lot of times it just is, it's something that's on a training budget and either it happens or it doesn't. But, and I feel like you're the same way. I cannot stress enough how incredibly important it is to give people tools to do their job well. I mean, you would do it for anything that's hands-on, right? Application, mechanic has a toolbox, has tools, has the things that they need. But when it comes to these sort of we would consider possibly intangibles, we don't give them those things, and it's a real shame because it could be a lot of things that go terribly wrong and could have an impact on other people, on that person as well.
Yeah. No, it does. Experiment with this, and if anybody's listening, do the slight experiment yourself. Just observe. Just have conversations with people. And when you talk to them about their jobs, their past careers, um, why they left the workplace, what keeps them at the workplace, 90% of the time, it's never about doing their actual technical job itself, right? They always reference the other people, the
Yeah.
culture. I had a bad manager and I left. It's usually not, I can't say never. It's usually not about being able to perform that job function itself. And even analyze people's different careers. It doesn't matter if they're in manufacturing or not, right? Throughout their career life cycle, they might be a realtor, work in the hospitality industry, right? A computer programmer. People move through different skills, different technical skills throughout their career. All of those, it doesn't matter what industry you are in, tech, manufacturing, real estate, all of those have one thing that are synonymous amongst each one, and that's people operations. All right. And again, I think that that's why, now we're recognizing the paramount and absolute need and necessity for that to rise to the top. And even reflecting back on my time as a bomb tech, that's a job where if your technical skill was not developed to the right proficiency, almost was not good enough. All right. And I mean, there is so much training and development that goes on, with performing a job function like that. I mean, that's all you do. If you're not out in the field actually doing the job, you're training and you're developing. And you could really have that technical expertise down 100%, know how to navigate that field and do that job. But if you weren't trusted, if you didn't have that people piece to it, relationships, being able to work well with others, you were not going to be sent down range. Plain and simple, you know? And in fact, even as we rift here a little bit, a lot of business owners and a lot of business leaders will tell you that business is about relationships. That's just not outward facing, right? That's just not company to company. Take that script and flip it inwards. Your company operations is about relationships. All right. And those relationships are predicated on effective and efficient leadership skills being taught in your workplace. We have these
Yeah.
conversations and like I come to these revelations why aren't we just shouting this? you know? But it's a totally people centric industry. And we need to flip that script and continue to focus on those things. Yes.
Yeah. Now it's like a perfect wrap up because I was going to ask you like what's some some final nuggets of wisdom you want to share with the group. Is there anything else like that that you want to share? You've got these really great sort of final statements that I really are like aha moments, right? So I mean, is there anything else that you would based on your experience in your career or things that you're seeing with other, I mean, you've served manufacturing in the past. Obviously, you worked in the MEP system before and you continue to work with manufacturers today. I mean, is there any other final thoughts around, leadership or any best practices they could adopt or things to consider, for our listeners out there?
Yeah. There is one thing I would like to throw specifically out there. I've been asked multiple times, really, over the past few months, specifically about leadership training and development. Yeah, I've been asked, is this meant for executives? Is this meant for mid and senior level leaders? Is this meant for entry level employees? And my answer to that is yes. All right. It's meant for everybody. All right. Even these core skills that we talk about, communication, coaching, conflict resolution, delegation, those all serve an application at each one of those career levels, right? And just because we're executive level leaders doesn't mean that we still don't develop these skills to lead in the workplace, right? It doesn't mean that just because we've risen to that level of our career, we're really what we're saying there is we have different positional power and authorities associated with our job, right? We don't neglect that we still have these leadership skills that we need to develop and apply in the workplace. So again, just food for thought for the audience. How are you engaging all of your organization around leadership training and development? How are we all speaking that same leadership language in industry? And how is that connected to our business drivers? And at the end of the day, leading to a positive result at the company. And I do want to give a shout out to the 6 M's of manufacturing podcast, right? Because we're talking about the 1 M right now, right? Manpower,
Right.
people power, if you will. Um, how does how do our people operations allow us to function in those other 5 M's as well? Right. And it does, of course.
Mhm.
People operations is connected to machinery, material, methods, measurement, and Mother Nature. All right. Was that it? Yes, those are the six. There's probably some nuance there. Those are what our people operations is what drives every successful aspect of our organization. Plain and simple. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. You're spot on with that one. I love that kind of sound off too, because that's perfect. I mean, that kind of puts it in perspective exactly how it ties in with everything that you're trying to achieve, right? It's fully integrated in everything that you're trying to achieve or move the needle on. But people are at the center of all of those things and have a direct effect on all of those things, right?
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, awesome. I thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I think you've got some great insights around leadership development and it being a developable skill, which I think sometimes gets overlooked. So it being like a one shot deal, and it's something that either you have or you don't. But thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adrian. Again, I'll say it, huge shout out to the MEP. It's an honor to be here and have these conversations. But I think you guys, the SC MEP is really leading by example by, showcasing this and making it important for companies to engage with down in your neck of the woods.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this episode of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. Special thanks to Joe Fetzer for bringing his vibrant personality, his passion, and his unique perspective to today's conversation. Visit the episode notes for details and reference links to information shared during today's discussion. Did you enjoy this episode? That's awesome. Follow our podcast and share with your network. And remember, don't just make it better.